Open Your Eyes is brought to you by the Belize Bank. Our country, your bank.
Good morning. Welcome to Open Your Eyes.
Start your morning right. I am John Palacio.
And I'm Marlene Cuellar.
And thank you for joining us. Yeah, we're
This
switching things up.
morning.
It is a Wednesday morning, Belize. It is a Wednesday. Normally we're here together on a Wednesday. We started the week yesterday, which was a Tuesday.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, it's hot. Oh
Yeah.
my goodness, it's so hot. But I'm so proud and I feel so good to be a Belizean and being in this lovely, lovely country, Belize.
Well, it's a little cloudy outside, and
It
I'm not
is.
quite sure what that means. But we're going to go ahead and read our prepared forecast for
Okay.
today.
So here we go. In the general situation, it's saying here warm, unstable, and relatively moist conditions prevail as a tropical wave affects the area.
All right, for the 24-hour forecast, the skies will be cloudy at times. Then showers and thunderstorms will be isolated, occurring mostly inland and south, with the activity increasing tonight.
Ooh. And this will be producing winds from the east at 10 to 15 knots, and the sea state will be choppy.
And our high temperatures for today are going to be 90 degrees Fahrenheit along the coast,
Oh my goodness.
98 inland, and 86 in the hills.
Well, I'll tell you what, so a little bit of good news with some lows for tonight at 81 degrees Fahrenheit. That's along the coast, 73 inland, and a cool 70 degrees Fahrenheit up in the hills.
Yeah, the only low there is the ones in the hills.
But it's good.
There is still a heat alert. Residents, especially those inland, are advised to stay hydrated and avoid outdoor activity as much as possible.
Well, let's take a look at the extended forecast, and it's saying here cloudy at times with a few showers and isolated thunderstorms developing mainly over southern areas and inland areas on Thursday morning. Activity will decrease and become isolated during the day, then increase again late Thursday night.
All right, and we want to thank Crystal Rosales for preparing that forecast this morning.
That's right. Thank you, Crystal. I'll tell you what, now you know exactly how to go along with your day preparing for the weather.
Yeah, we are expecting some showers,
Yeah.
and that is especially inland and south. That explains why it looks so cloudy out
Cloudy
there
out,
today.
But
All right.
nonetheless.
We're going to keep things moving with a bit of motivation to get the day started, and that means it's time for our eye opener. And our eye opener, taken from dailyom.com, goes like this. To co-create, we must first begin with a foundation of mutual respect. Gardens offer us a perfect opportunity to reconnect to our true selves and remember our place in the natural world. Rather than approach our gardens as mere investments of energy, we can look at the entire process of gardening, from planting seeds to harvesting food, as a way of deepening our conscious relationship with the creative force of the universe. If you are willing to shift our intention from dominating, or at least directing nature, to co-creating with nature instead, we may discover a deep peace and renewed sense of wonder. Imagine what it would be like to surrender certain aspects of your human world to the precision and surety of the natural environment. You might decide, for example, to forego your calendar and plant in rhythm with the cycles of the moon. When we recognize ourselves as allies, co-creators with the earth and the natural world, our relationship to our environment begins to change. We no longer feel the need to control the circumstances around us and can relish in the perfection of all that is. I know, this one is right up your alley, John.
I can relate to that. Because this morning, as I, there's always a routine, it's, for us. And the first thing I did was I woke up, I set some coffee in the coffee mug. Yes, I did. Yes, I did. And I learned from the best. And thereafter, I would normally sit down and watch some news. Got ready, and while getting ready, I normally go outside, start the vehicle just to warm up. You know what I did when I went to start my vehicle? I stopped and look at my little children. That's how I refer to them. Because, you know, when you connect with these flowers or whatever you plant, it feels so good. You know, you're connecting with your environment, you're connecting with the universe, and I feel so good, especially when you see the little shoots and they're growing. It's like you want to talk to them. So I know exactly where this is coming from.
I see people talk to them.
Yeah, there is a certain time of the year I could remember back PG days. My aunt would tell me because that tree is not bearing, you need to get a belt and you need to whoop that tree. No, for real. I remember that clearly.
The tree?
But yeah. That was something. I don't remember Dia de los Muertos. I'm not sure. I don't remember what time of the year, but it was a specific time of the year, a specific day that they told me to go outside and you whoop the tree with a belt and you tell it that, you know what, you need to bear. And lo and behold, we got coconuts.
Okay.
We got now this is tradition.
No.
But this is to tell you exactly.
I know my mom talks to her plants. Yeah. She scolds them if she needs to. Haven't seen spanking.
but then, you know, you feel so good knowing that you're connecting with nature. You're connecting with the environment. You're connecting with your trees, your plants. This is a wonderful eye opener, and I think that folks should get into it and see, you know, feel what we feel as people who grow stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think, you know, people who are gardeners, they will definitely tell you that there is far more that they get from it than just being able to see whether it's beautiful plants or seeing crops or fruits or whatever it is that you're growing. I think that it is. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. Yeah. I think that we can definitely learn from them in terms of the benefits that they do get.
Yeah.
And so today's eye opener is one that just reminds you, especially if this is one of your favorite pastimes, that you are in your own way co-creating along with nature, and that's a beautiful concept.
It is, and I you know, like I mentioned, try it. Get some pepper seeds or some sweet pepper seed, put it in your thing, you cover it with soil, not too much, you water it, and days afterwards, bam, you see a shoot.
See, people like you make it sound too easy.
It is easy. It is easy.
Coming from someone who's tried, it's not that easy. I need a few more sessions with Lyra.
Yes, she's good.
to get me through the starting phase.
Yeah, and
the cactuses grow though, because you don't have to do anything.
Yeah, they want to steer 18 there and that's it. But it is a great feeling, especially if you have a plant that everybody likes. You know, like the moringa, and that's a fever grass or what we refer to as lemongrass. That's beautiful.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. All right.
Mm-hmm.
Good.
So we've got a wonderful day lineup for you. It is a Wednesday. Again, we're at midweek. It's called Hump Day, or we refer to it as that. We've got some wonderful segments lined up for you. For the first one, this is actually a COVID update. This is what we do every day. And the 2020 Atlantic hurricane season is approaching, fast approaching. And we'll have Pro In to tell us all about it.
That's right. And the second part of the show, we'll be doing a check-in with some of our Belizean youths. We're talking about mental health during COVID-19.
Oh, definitely a topic to reckon with. In the third segment for this morning, virtual PE, physical education. We'll be talking about a basketball curriculum and, of course, virtual PE in the third segment.
And then we close off with another edition of Kids Time. And of course, this is sponsored by J&W Shopping Mart. And Dr. Binox is teaching children about weather formations. Wow. And of course, he's sticking with the theme of our conversation. He'll be talking about hurricanes. So that's going to be at the final part of our show. What we're going to do is take that break. And when we come back, we are going to be getting all the information we need to know about what we can expect for this 2020 Atlantic hurricane season. So we'll have that information after the break. Please. Thank
you. Indeed. Today's COVID update is brought to you by Fulltech Systems, your technology center, where you'll come for the price but stay for the service.
And welcome back to Open Your Eyes. We are now moving into our first segment on this lovely Wednesday morning. It is our what we refer to as our COVID-19 update, and with that, we are about to venture off into a topic of the 2020 Atlantic hurricane season. Now, in to tell us more, we've got Carlos Fuller, who is the International and Regional Liaison Officer for the Caribbean Community Climate Change Center. Mr. Fuller, good morning.
Good morning, and you're one of the few people who get the name of the institution correct.
Oh, you know, we try it every so often, sir. We try it every so often. But I'll tell you what, just listening to your voice reminded me of back in the days of radio broadcasting. And when we turned that microphone on for the Met service, it was Mr. Fuller.
Yes, indeed. And then those were some exciting times, June to November, indeed.
Definitely. So the 2020 hurricane season, Atlantic hurricane season is here. And so far we've seen, and this is out of the season actually, because it starts from June all the way to November, 1st June to end of November, but there was already a storm for this year. Let's venture off into the season and what's there to expect of it.
Well, indeed, as you said, the hurricane season actually started a bit earlier than we expected this year. Arthur forming just near the Bahamas. But in fact, this was the 5th year in a row that this has happened. And in the past, we have actually had to shift the hurricane season earlier and earlier over the past few decades because of this occurring. So indeed, this may signal a trend to something indeed that we have to change in the not too distant future. But coming to this hurricane season, indeed, all the indicators are that once again, we will be having a very active hurricane season. These are the predictions coming out of the U.S. Weather Service, out of Colorado State University, who really launched this seasonal prediction decades ago, out of the European centers. So indeed, it does seem that we're going to be having an active hurricane season this year. That is more than we normally get. Normally, we get about 12 tropical storms, of which 6 become hurricanes and 3 become very strong hurricanes, categories 3, 4, or 5. This year, we expect more than that.
So explain to us how these predictions are made. How do scientists decide whether or not it's going to be an average, above average, or below average season?
Well, there are various systems in the atmosphere and in the ocean that would trigger the formation of a hurricane season. And we now have computer models that predict what those conditions are, what they are right now and what they look like in the future. So among these, for example, is whether we have an El Nino or a La Nina. This year, we are in a neutral phase, and it is likely that we'll go into a La Nina later on the year. If we have an El Nino in the Pacific, that means that usually leads to less hurricanes than normal in the Caribbean. Neutral, it's average. La Nina, when it's cooler in the Pacific, the Caribbean is a bit warmer and you get more. So it's towards that part of it. Okay. Secondly, we have very warm sea surface temperatures, and we know hurricanes get their energy from the sea. So the Caribbean and the Atlantic Ocean are warmer than normal. We also have an enhanced West African rainy season. And when that occurs, you have more vigorous tropical waves leaving the African continent, moving across the Atlantic, and those also trigger hurricanes. And then we have a less vertical wind shear than we have that we normally have. Now, wind shear is how the wind changes with either direction or strength, and as you move from the surface up into the upper atmosphere. If you have strong wind shear, it cuts off systems from forming in the vertical. While if the wind shear is small, then the clouds are able to form very deep, and then that triggers the hurricane. And then finally, our trade winds are weaker than normal. If you have very strong winds coming in from the Caribbean, again, that tends to tear things apart. But if the trade winds are weak or tending to become weak, again, that leads to more hurricanes forming. So with those 5 factors coming into play, it does seem this year is going to be an active year.
Now, there are two things. So we can say whether or not it's going to be active or, as the prediction is for this year. But there's also the specific area that activity is expected. Sometimes I know that you'd say this time of the year it will happen more in formation more in the Gulf, in front of the Caribbean, or further out. So what are the indicators saying for now?
Well, indeed, in the early part of the year, hurricane formation tends to occur in the western part of the Caribbean Sea, in our area. And that's because the waters are warmer and we still have lingering cold fronts in the region through the Yucatan that would be a trigger for something to form at the tail end of one of these very weak fronts at this time of the year. So that is one aspect of it. And then again, later in the year, going into October, November, again, the Western Caribbean becomes the area favorable for formation. And those, in fact, are the trickier ones because you're going from a transition from tropical to the winter season, and that's when systems tend to be very erratic. During the middle of the year, that's when you have your typical big hurricanes coming across the Atlantic into the Caribbean, very predictable. You know where they're going. They tend to be the very big, strong ones and will affect you. Interestingly, this year, we have been noticing a lot of moisture coming in from the Pacific in the upper atmosphere. So you tend to have a lot of these high clouds over us. It just makes the day look rather gloomy, no rain out of it, but it's moisture coming in from the Pacific in the upper atmosphere. And in fact, that is what we have right now. And a tropical wave came in last night, passing through us right now. And those two things triggered the rain we had today. In fact, when you look at the computer models in the Pacific right now, those systems are still there producing a lot of these high-level clouds. And interestingly, it seems that some of these may drift into the Central America and over Yucatan this weekend into Monday. And something could form out of it as we go into the early part of next week, right offshore us. So indeed, we could have an interesting opening of the hurricane season next week.
Wow.
I don't know if interesting was the word I was choosing just now. I thought that story was leading to good news, that the Pacific clouds were going to keep everything away.
Interesting. It seems that they want to pay us a visit. But again, it's very early, and anything can occur out of it. It could just be a lot more rain, and nothing actually forms out of it. But indeed, it does seem we're going to be having some significant rainfall over the weekend as this system drifts into the Yucatan.
Carlos, I think one of the things that we have all observed, and we don't need any science background to be able to verify this, that we've seen changing weather patterns in our country. You're talking about droughts, you're talking about less cold air coming down, less rains, lots of heat. When you put all of these things into consideration, what does it say about what our traditional hurricane seasons and the expectations we usually have with those patterns, are those changing as well?
Absolutely. In fact, the latest research that came out a couple of weeks ago verifies what people were sensing. We're having many more strong hurricanes than we ever had before. So the data, we now have enough data from the past hurricane seasons to indicate that indeed hurricanes are stronger than they used to be before. There is still no indication yet about the number of hurricanes. That is still debatable, but the number of strong hurricanes is increasing compared to the weaker ones. Secondly, everything is showing us again, and there is consensus on it, hurricanes have more water in it than they had before. So they tend to, because of the warm atmosphere, the hurricanes themselves produce more rain than they ever did before.
Is this?
And then,
you were going with finally, go ahead.
And the other thing is that the patterns of movement tend to be more erratic now. We saw what occurred last year over the Bahamas, where this hurricane just sat over an
Sat
island
there,
for
yeah.
like 3 days. Yeah, and that because what occurred to us with Keith back, was it in 1999, 2000, with Hurricane Keith over San Pedro, and Kikokor again for 3 days. Yeah, so indeed we're seeing much more of these than we have had before.
Is this a direct result of climate change?
Absolutely, climate change is now a factor in it. And so because of the warmer atmosphere and warmer oceans, and we know now that 90% of the extra energy because of global warming goes into the ocean, not into the atmosphere. So while we are feeling all this heat, you're only feeling 10% of what is actually occurring in the ocean.
And then a question here. So we always, yes, we go through the hurricane season, but one of the scariest thing about the hurricane season is that there's a peak. What causes a hurricane peak, a hurricane season peak? And why is there a peak?
Well, again, all these conditions that I mentioned before don't occur simultaneously. They gradually build up during the year. And so that is why as June comes around, you may get one or two. And as the oceans get warmer and warmer, because don't forget, we have not actually begun the official summer season yet for the northern hemisphere. We are still into spring, going into summer. Okay. And so as summer comes along, because the sun is now directly over us, that is when you get more heat coming in, and the atmosphere and the ocean takes a while to respond to that energy coming in. The heat then builds up, and that is what then triggers the peak of the hurricane season, which really occurs on the 10th of September, interestingly for us.
Wow. I know, right? I know. I also wanted to know if weather is trendy. And I'm saying this because I had a fisherman uncle, and he would just look at the weather. He would feel the atmosphere, and he could tell you, what, I'm not going fishing because the north wind is about to come in the next few hours. That's going to do bad for fishing. So is weather trendy? Are people, and will it continue to be like that, especially because of climate change?
Well, first of all, I would not refer to it as trendy. In fact, we now recognize that local communities and indigenous peoples have an inherent knowledge about weather and climate. And they are using a holistic approach to how they look at the weather, while scientists, trained meteorologists, are very principled, having these very dogmatic principles that we follow to come up with our conclusions. While we are now recognizing that indigenous peoples and local communities have this knowledge that is passed down to them traditionally, and we're now trying to see how we can capture both sides, because indeed they can both contribute for a better understanding of these weather patterns. So we have to recognize that farmers, fishermen, people who live off the land, really know what they're seeing. They know about planting dates inherently from the flora and the fauna and what the animals are doing around them, how the land is feeling. So indeed, they have that knowledge inbred in them that has passed down from them from generation to generation orally. And we're now trying to figure out how to capture that kind of information. Unfortunately, climate change may actually affect that traditional passage of knowledge, because indeed things are changing. And so climate change may actually affect how that traditional knowledge is passed along from one generation to the next.
Wow, wow.
And now, when we pay attention to what's happening on the other side of the world and the cyclones, which they monitor, they've been seeing stronger storms as well. Is it just a general adaptation or I should just say change, that is taking place, that there's a strengthening in some of these natural disasters?
Absolutely. Once again, the hurricanes and in the Pacific, they may be known as tropical cyclones, typhoons, or whatever. They're the same systems. Again, they're seeing the more intense systems also over there. Just this past week in the Bay of Bengal, we had a very strong one. However, what is very gratifying to note is that when it made landfall, it did not produce the kind of deaths that we saw in 1970. 1970, another storm, hurricane, went the same path and produced over 500,000 casualties in Bangladesh and India. So indeed, luckily we now have good warning systems and good response systems that allow people to actually evacuate the areas. So while things are getting stronger, at least our response is now improving significantly.
And that's especially for us in Belize. We know since we've had the Doppler radar, we've been able to get a bird's eye view of systems as they approach or pass in front of Belize. How does that change, you think, just the level of preparation that we have and the mitigation of the risks of loss of life?
Absolutely. In fact, I think Belizeans are now one of the most hurricane-ready nations in the world.
Wow.
We certainly learned from what occurred for us in 1931, when in fact there was no satellite, no aircraft, no radar. At the 1961, in fact, 61 was the year when we first launched, the first satellite that was launched. And Hattie was one of the first hurricanes that was actually seen on a weather satellite. And since then, we have developed a very effective meteorological service with state-of-the-art Doppler and satellite receiving systems and telecommunication systems and good weather observations from around the country using automatic weather stations and weather balloons and so on. So indeed, we are an integral factor of the monitoring system, which we send to the Hurricane Center in Miami, which then compiles all this data from around the various platforms, figures out the warning system, which we then modify based on our national circumstances to warn our population. We now have an active NEMO that indeed has prepared the country, and I've heard them for the past 2 weeks already on radio and TV, advising people to get ready for the hurricane season. Yeah. And I think especially because of what we're going through right now, this is when you really need to have that family action plan.
Yes.
Because indeed. With the restrictions on the number of people we can, we should be getting together, and the social distancing of 6 feet. Indeed, you want to be able to hunker down in your own house in the event that we were to be faced with one of these threats.
Yeah. I'm so glad you mentioned that this was a conversation I think we had last week, just kind of putting into context what hurricane planning is going to look like in the middle of a pandemic. Because you're right, there are things like social distancing that have to be taken into consideration. There is loss of income, so some people can't prepare the way they used to. From your experience and from what you've seen in other parts of the world, how have they managed with that? Because hurricane planning is very similar throughout.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So in fact, the areas that have been affected by COVID or by hurricanes in the past couple of weeks have not had the huge pandemic. So for example, as you know, Australia did very early action, and they have not been affected very much by the COVID, and so they were able to take the necessary actions. Bangladesh, again, they have not been having that huge outbreak we've been having in other areas. So in fact, we may be one of the first areas where, with limited areas to move, at least our islands, we are going to be almost the guinea pigs of what you need to do properly to prepare for such an onslaught.
Yeah.
Wow.
I know no one wants to think of preparing for hurricanes in the season, but if we just look at what's happened to Caribbean nations or Caribbean brothers and sisters just in the past few years, we know that the effects are devastating and they linger for so long. The other observation, I think, I'm trying to remember, was it Maria and Irma? The two category 5s that came back to back, they affected the Eastern Caribbean.
That's right, Dominica, Barbuda.
Yes. Yeah.
Indeed. Yeah, very serious thing. The fortunate thing for Belize is that we are able to move inland.
Yeah.
As you know, 90% of the people who lose their lives lose it because of the storm surge. Water is the big killer in a hurricane. And we do have the landmass. We can evacuate our islands. We can move inland, moving away from the sea, but also moving away from the rivers, also to go to high dry land and avoid that water. That is the big killer, and I think we are able to do that.
You know, funny enough, you mentioned moving away from the rivers. It reminds me of Tropical Depression 16, which some referred to as a 100-year storm. What I'd like for us to do at this particular point, while we've got folks watching, can you give us the from what to hurricane? Because I feel, I think some of these like for the phases, I think for the most part, some people might take them for granted. When you hear, oh, it's only a tropical storm, oh, it's only a tropical depression, man, but they're all dangerous alike. Can you tell us about these?
Certainly. So the typical way these systems will form, we get like 100 tropical waves cross the Atlantic Ocean from Africa every year, passing through, and that is what produces our rains during the rainy season. About 100 of them. Of those, typically, a few of them would develop into a tropical depression. And a tropical depression is merely an area of low pressure that has a small amount of circulation in it, but winds are no more than 30 miles an hour. So, and that would not produce any significant damage, but they are very disorganized, so they tend to have a lot of rainfall, and if they're moving very slowly, indeed, they can then just drench you totally, which is what occurred with Tropical Depression 16. It is not a windstorm, it is a rainmaker. And if you are in a valley and the rain is occurring up in the mountains, all that water then rushes down into the lowest area. As you know, water will find the lowest point and head towards it. And so that is what occurred in the Stann Creek Valley with Tropical Depression 16, when all that water came down and washed out these people. And indeed, when we speak about a 100-year storm, that is an engineering term for engineers when they design systems. And they would then ask the person, well, do you want me to design this bridge to last 100 years? Then I need to take the 100-year storm into account. But if it's going to be a system to last 500 years, then I will take the 500-year storm into account, because it is possible that you'll get 5 100-year storms in 500 years. So you don't want to design it for the 100-year storm. So it is just a way of convincing the stakeholders, this is what you need to prepare for as you're building a system.
Yeah.
And so indeed, it was a very intense rainfall event that produced that 100-year storm. Now, when winds exceed the 25 or 30 mile an hour area, but does not go beyond 39 miles per hour, it is then a tropical storm. You get winds now, indeed, are stronger, but they are no more than 40 miles per hour. And it is at that point that the Hurricane Center then puts a name on a system.
Okay.
Yeah.
It becomes a tropical storm, Arthur, once it is a tropical storm. A center is denoted, it is well defined, and the rain bands are now much more visible, and you can actually see a center and begin to track it properly. A tropical depression, the center is hard to find. A storm, you'll now be able to see that.
Yeah.
Once the winds are now between 40 miles an hour and 74 miles per hour, so that is then the tropical storm. Sorry, it is 40 to 75 miles per hour is a tropical storm. A tropical depression is up to 39 miles per hour.
Okay.
And then we know it moves through the categories.
Of hurricanes, yeah. Once it exceeds 74 miles per hour, up to 95, category 1, then 2, 3, 4, and 5. And anything above 155 miles per hour is then a category 5 hurricane.
And see, that was the point I wanted to get at. I remember growing up, we've all, as Belizeans, we know and hear of hurricanes our entire life, at least the threat of hurricanes.
Yeah.
And it used to be a rarity when you'd hear a Category 5. I mean, I remember just feeling paralyzed by fear with Mitch being a Category 5. Thankfully, never made landfall in Belize. And now it's so much more frequent. And I'm trying to remember the specific storm. I won't bother naming it because I'll probably be wrong. But there was one that had exceeded, it was one of the highest on records in the Caribbean, or one that had impacted one of the islands. So we know that even the current categories that we're defining for even Category 5, we're seeing storms that exceed those wind speeds.
Oh, absolutely, and when it was designed, and in fact, the persons who actually came up with categories was a wind engineer and director of the Hurricane Center in Miami to try to tell people what to expect from a hurricane, because somebody going through a Category 1, 75 miles per hour compared to something at 160 is a big difference.
Yeah.
And so this was a way of trying to tell people, look, this is kind of the impacts to expect from this system. And so indeed, it was never foreseen to have a category above Category 5, because any a design system, a very strong building would have withstood anything above 155 miles per hour. Mm-hmm. Now, maybe wind engineers need to look at that to see, does a building, would you change the way you would design a building for 200 miles per hour compared to 160 miles per hour? I don't know, and maybe that is something now that now needs to be looked at.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So we've seen more Category 5s, but not only that, we've seen them rapidly progressing or increasing in intensity. So you'd start off, one day you hear it's Category 1 or 2, and you feel like a blink of an eye, it's Category 5.
Yeah.
I'm exaggerating clearly, but that's how fast it feels. So this is also a major threat when you look at just how hurricane systems are changing as time goes by.
Absolutely, and in fact, that is one of the things that indeed we now recognize happening. When I was in school, for example, we knew that a system, it would take a day to go from a tropical depression to a tropical storm, another day storm to hurricane, another day from 1 to 2, and so indeed, it took you like maybe 7 days to go from a depression up to a Category 5 hurricane. We have seen them occurring overnight. In fact, Keith was one of those examples, going from a depression to Category 4 within basically 24 hours offshore Belize. Yeah. And so we're seeing that now. And one of the systems we now have in place to try to capture that is that we recognize it is when this system goes over a very warm pool of water that triggers that rapid intensification. And so the U.S. Weather Service now launches these drifting buoys, really small submarines that go in autonomous to track where these warm pools are ahead of the hurricane, as they project where the hurricane is going to go in the next 24 hours, and they try to launch these very small submersible gliders into the water ahead of it to see if they can detect these warm pools, to see if that would indicate this rapid intensification. It's sort of like the flying drones we have now. Yeah. They also have submersible ones now to do the same thing.
Yeah. What causes the forecast track? What steers the hurricane or the storm? We have what we would refer to as rivers of air in the atmosphere. The same way we have rivers, in the sea, or currents in the oceans. We have these currents in the atmosphere that actually is what moves these systems. So we have what we call the Bermuda High system over Bermuda in the Atlantic. Is quasi-stationary, always there, and so you tend to have systems forming south of it in the Atlantic, in the Caribbean, and they move from east to west, and as they go around the western part of that Atlantic high, they then start to turn northwards towards Florida, and then they recurve and head back out to sea around that big high-pressure system. Mm-hmm. So that is the typical climatological movement of systems. However, we also have transitory systems like upper level troughs that move across the U.S.
that would then either pull it further west or further east, and then and change the trajectory of that somewhat.
Yeah. Huh. So when we look at what we have been seeing in the hurricane seasons, I wanted to ask what are some of the recommendations now in terms of being able to prepare or build in a way to withstand just the intensity that we're seeing with hurricanes. I remember a long time ago we were talking about kind of returning to our roots, going on stilted houses again for storm surges, and so it's kind of a rethink of what we used to do before.
Absolutely, and in fact, I would say the first thing that we really need to do is proper land use planning. Mm-hmm. That is where it is that you're going to build your house for the long term, and we know that the most vulnerable areas would be on the Keys and along the coast. So obviously, if you're going to build anything there, you need to have your structure high enough up from the water to allow the storm surge to pass under it.
Yeah.
So whether that's in the Keys or on the mainland, and even when you're building on the coastline or at the Keys, there's also a natural sand dune that is built up by the natural tides over the years. Mm-hmm. And you should really build behind that sand dune, because that sand dune also provides you with the first line of protection, because that absorbs most of that energy from it. So that is certainly one of them. Again, when you build your home, of course, you want to build it properly. If it's wooden, you need to put in ties from your posts, anchor your roof to the pillars, again using hurricane straps and that sort of thing, properly anchored all your systems in. The typical roof, if it's going to be sheet metal, should have a hip roof, and that is the sharper the angle of your roof, the less likelihood it is going to be to lift off, because that is how you usually have structural damage on your building, because the roof rips away and then everything starts to fall apart. Yeah. So you really want to have a steep angle on your roof. With hurricane shutters properly, and actually from the outside in, and that is, I mean, by fastening the shutters from the outside, and the wind blows against that shutter, it makes the shutter stronger.
Okay.
While if you have it from the inside, indeed, you're then allowing those nails to easily come off, because then they have no way of, nothing is holding it in. So indeed, you really want to put all those things in place.
Yeah, these all make a lot of sense. I think, naturally we have to start thinking ahead of how we're going to prepare, or at least have homes that will be more resilient to what we're seeing. John asked a question about forecasts and the predicted paths, and I think that this is a great time to kind of get a head start on the education on it. We saw in one of the previous storms where the storm surge came in Ladyville. It didn't make landfall in Ladyville. And we saw where, we had the desperation of people trying to get out of their houses. They didn't know how high the water was going to raise. And I remember having a conversation after that we need to look at the cone and understand it properly in terms of the impacts that it may have. It's not about kind of the specific pinpoint that we look at. It's more looking at the wider range. Do you want to go ahead and explain that for us?
Certainly. So in the case, and that was Hurricane Earl a few years ago, when the center actually, I believe, passed either over or just south of Belize City. But in fact, Ladyville was in the northern eye wall, which is the strongest part of a hurricane. And with the wind coming in from the east, it drove all that water into that natural bay that is where Ladyville is in. Because as you know, Belize City is actually a peninsula, and then it dips in towards the Ladyville area and back out. So all that water accumulated into this bay and then pushes water on land. And so in fact, Ladyville is a very prone area, a very vulnerable area for storm surges. So even though it was a strong Category 1 hurricane, it did push something like 6 feet of water into the Ladyville area, and indeed threatened many homes. Indeed. So, as you're absolutely right, we have to look at the extent of the hurricane force winds, because that is where you're going to have the strongest winds and the strongest storm surge. And the storm surge is always going to be highest in the northern part of a hurricane, because that is where the wind is coming in from the east, bringing in water from the east. Whereas on the southern part of the hurricane, the wind is actually from the land out to sea, and the storm surge is going to be less, obviously. In fact, the water may actually go out to sea because the land wind is pushing the water out. And so you really have to look at where the center is making landfall to be able to predict, whether you're going to have a storm surge or not, and how high that storm surge is. But obviously, we cannot, no one can yet predict with any certainty where the center of a hurricane is going to make landfall. We have made excellent progress right now, and in fact, our 24-hour error on landfall is now something like 60 miles. So even 24 hours before a hurricane makes landfall, we know it's going to be between either within a 60-mile range. So for us, that is anywhere between Belize City and Curacao Town. Between Belize City and Dangriga, taking a look at that. So that is why we always tell people, don't look at where the center of that thing is going to be. Obviously, you have to assume it's going to be over you. And if you're outside of that cone, indeed, then you can maybe start to take your guard down. But once you're in that cone, expect it to affect you. And if it does, you're ready. If it doesn't, you say, thank goodness, I escaped the brunt of it.
I hear you.
I think if we put it back into perspective of current times, what this pandemic has taught us is that what seemed to be a far-fetched idea, a pandemic every 100 years, in fact, does pan out to be true. And I don't think any one of us living through this experience ever thought we'd see the day that something like this would happen. And it's also true for hurricanes. I know we've talked so much about being spared, but it doesn't mean that that's a permanent status that we get to keep, especially for Belize City.
Absolutely, and I will always recall any person who lived through the 1931 or 61 Hattie, who went through the brunt of it, will always be the first to tell you hurricanes are nothing to play with. Now, others who have been on the periphery of one of these systems will say, oh, well, I went through that hurricane. Yes, but you did not go through the brunt of it, and so you can speak that way. And so, indeed, we really have to listen when we hear people speaking about the impact of a hurricane. And in fact, I always recall the late Bishop Wright, having lost all his family through it, was one of the most serious advocates of preparedness and of heeding warnings.
I don't think a lot of people know how traumatic it was for Bishop Wright. I think it was Hattie. It was Hurricane Hattie, where he lost his family and he clung on for life and rode out the storm. And you're right. My mom experienced Hattie, and I know when she hears hurricane, it's about action. It's not about thinking or thinking twice. It's about moving and being safe as fast as possible.
And I think that's one of the reasons why NEMO will keep telling people, make your plan now while your head is clear. because when it's time to take action, it's not the time now to think, well, what should I do? Should I go or not go? Or should I buy this or buy that? No, you've already thought it out. You have your checklist, and you can then, taking action.
Yeah.
Too many people, as you know, will wait until the last minute and then rush to buy things, to put in gas, to try to do many things at the same time, and you end up actually creating problems because of the traffic jams, and the supermarkets are clogged up and so on.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, I think if we take a cue from what we've done with COVID-19, when we shut down and locked down because we wanted to prevent the worst, and so we came out with just only 18 cases. We did lose 2 lives, but it certainly wasn't the worst case scenario that we'd feared for. So we did the work then, and I think we could do the same practice in the hurricane season. If we're asked to move, move. If we come back home and nothing happened, that's why we did it.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think maybe that has prepared us properly for the hurricane season. Because as you said, I recall when we were first launching these shutdowns and so on, supermarkets got swamped, and police had to put in lines in place and so on. Now, as we're living it, people are taking their time. We're still on the same measures, but you're no longer seeing that mad rush. People know that every 4 or 5 days, I need to top up a bit more to keep going.
Yeah.
And if we keep that same system in place for the hurricane season, we should even weather it out quite well this year.
All right. Anything in terms of your advice to Belizeans when we hear above average? This is for the entire region, but of course, it only takes one to really have devastating effects on our country.
Absolutely. So, in fact, what the U.S. Weather Service is predicting this year, we're going to have something like 13 to 19 storms. Normally, we have 12. 6 to 10 hurricanes. Normally, we have 6. And 3 to 6 major hurricanes. Normally, we have 3. And those are categories 3, 4, and 5. And trust me, when somebody will say it's only a 3 compared to a 5, a 3 is to me as bad as a 5. You don't want to be staying around for anything above a category 2 hurricane. You move.
That you mean for Belize City or all of the coast?
All the coast, yes. We're talking about storm surge, significant storm surge now. Yeah. Anything between 10 to 15 feet of water, you don't want to be in that. Yeah. That is like a bulldozer hitting your house.
I could imagine. Well, Carlos Fuller, thank you so very much. I'll tell you what, we learned a lot today.
Yeah.
And it's always nice to hear from you, sir. Thank you so very much.
Thank you very much for having me, and have a pleasant day.
Oh, wow. Speaking of hurricanes, I could just hear the winds again of Hurricane Earl, and that was devastating to us just to hear it. But nonetheless, we need to take a break. When we come back, we will be talking to some youths about youth and mental health and COVID-19. So stay with us. We'll be right back.
This COVID update was brought to you by Fulltech Systems, your technology center, where you'll come for the price, but stay for the service. Our Fulltech family
and prevent the spread of COVID-19.
And welcome back to Open Your Eyes. A cool, should I say cool? It's a hot Wednesday morning. It is not cool. Cool inside our studio, yeah, it's cool. Our next topic is actually youth and mental health and COVID-19, especially during this time. Now we've got a panel in. We've got Ada Escobar, and she's the communications officer at the Department of Youth Services. And along with Ada, we've got Trijari Yearwood, who is a business student at SJC. Amy Wade, who is a mental health advocate at SJC, and she's out of Benca, I think it says here.
Yeah.
Joshua Munoz, who is a psychology student at SJC. Jacqueline Acosta, mental health advocate right here in Belize City. And am I missing
And
someone?
Armando Perez.
Yes, and Armando, who's an entrepreneur. Guys, good morning and welcome.
Good morning. Thanks for having us. Good morning.
Yeah.
Happy to be here.
You guys need to start a choir.
No, I gotta say, this is perhaps just a great indicator of the difference between generations. You guys are all properly seated in front of your camera,
Yeah.
and everybody understands how to use the mute button. If you go in an adult Zoom meeting, you're gonna see what I'm talking about, right? But good morning.
morning,
It's
good
great to have you guys here.
All right, Aida, let's start with you. Let's start with you and the works of the youth Department of Youth Services, actually, especially dealing with youth and mental health. Let's start there.
Well, good morning, guys. I'm so happy to be back with all of these young people. Let's hope I blend in. I can pretend to be 20 years old this morning with everybody else. But the Department of Youth Services, as you guys know, we try to stay current with our young people. Yeah. And this month has been, advocating mental health, and it's something really important. And we see that, we have a whole unit on health, but I must say maybe about 5-6 years ago, that unit focused a lot on HIV and how we can help our young people with that. And in those years, we've seen the importance of as a whole and the importance of mental health as a whole and how it affects young people just overall. And now even more so with COVID-19 and all the restrictions and rules that it's brought. So I'm really excited to kind of open this conversation, open the dialogue, have a few of our young people share how they've been feeling. And I think what we want to get across today is, hey, everyone out there, all our young people out there, but everyone really, let's talk about mental health. It shouldn't be a stigma anymore. It should be something that, let's be honest, all of us are facing something. And if we weren't before, I think with COVID-19 and the quarantine and staying home, we all kind of had a little experience of that. So hopefully that kind of has us understand each other a lot more when it comes to mental health.
So let's just start off, I think, with a check-in. And Aida, you are young. We appreciate you joining us and sharing beyond just DYS your own personal experience.
Yeah.
This has been a life-shifting experience for all of us. And I just want to know, how are you guys doing? What are some of the thoughts and feelings that you've been experiencing since the start of the pandemic?
Well, for me, I think even before that first case hit in Belize, in San Pedro, we saw how it was kind of taking over the world. And I like to read news in the morning, just world news. I like to look at Open Your Eyes in the morning. I like to stay current. And I saw how it started in Wuhan, and I really worrying, and it kept spreading. And I have family that live in other parts of the world, and so it was really scary seeing how it was starting to get to those countries. So I think it's been something that I've currently been worrying about before it even hit us here. And people say, why worry? It's not going to help the situation. And it's true, and I know that, but I couldn't help it. And so when it finally hit us, it was really hard, especially when it got okay, we're closing our offices. We really have to just go online now. And then staying home for however long. Honestly, I don't even remember how long I was home. I felt like that whole time was just a war.
Yeah.
It was really hard. I think I had some days where and then the heat in Belize, let's talk about that for a second. That was not helping anybody's mental health.
Yeah, March felt like 90 days, true?
Yes. I think so.
And let's
So
get
I know that.
let's get the feel from everybody else, and we'll start with Trijari. Then we move on down to Amy, Joshua, Jacqueline, and Armando. How did this affect you guys?
For me personally, I was released from school from March 20th, and I've been home since. I haven't left the house, not even to go across the street, around the corner. I'm just in the house, and it plays a lot with your mind when you're not used to being solely in the house, when you're used to going around. Like, for example, I go to school every day, so I'm used to that, like being outside of the house in a outside environment. But it changed when you're inside, and you have to deal with stuff that you try to avoid from home. For example, family always have their little conflicts, but you have to deal with them now.
Especially when you're all cooped up together. You're not alone.
You can just walk out of school if the conflict, no?
Yeah. So from March 20th to now, you really haven't done anything. Like, you haven't had to go back to school.
No.
So what do you do to pass your time?
Well, we had transitioned from out of classes to online schooling.
Yeah.
So that was occupying my time for a while. But when that stopped, I would go to YouTube and, expand. Like, if you're not learn to cook, then we are the
Alright.
like lot of cooking apps on my phone where I learned to cook different things. So I learned a new hobby.
Okay.
That's good.
All right, Amy, let's hear from you.
For me, when it first started, I always thought, well, this won't hit Belize. This definitely won't hit Belize. We're lucky.
Yeah.
And when they said they're closing the country and they're going to close classes, I was like, okay, something is actually going to happen. And then that Friday that they closed classes, the 20th, the Monday we had our first case, and that's when I started freaking out and having a bit of anxiety.
Yeah.
We have one case. That means we could have so many other cases. So, and then that, and transitioning to online classes, that Friday we had in class, and then the Monday we had to be on our computers worrying about if this virus is going to affect us, our family, our friends, and then having to deal with school. So for me, that was the first thing. A lot of anxiety and stress, transitioning to online classes and seeing our first case, and as things progress. But recently, what I started doing to
Pass the time.
calm myself, to calm myself, and I started doodling, learning to draw a bit. I started exercising a bit. I helped my mom with gardening because she started gardening, and my sister also. So we're all there. And so also, like how Tijari said, instead of having conflicts and whatever and try to walk away, we try to do something, like I said, gardening.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. That's one way I've been coping.
Yeah.
At what point
Okay.
did you leave the house? Have you left the house since? Yeah.
I actually didn't leave the house until I think like last week. My sister would have to go to San Ignacio to go do something.
Yeah.
And she would ask me if I would want to go, and no. I'm gonna stay right here.
Yeah.
So last week was the first time I actually left the house and went to San Ignacio, and it was great. It was great to be out of the house and have some fresh air.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
All right, and Joshua?
Yeah. In San Pedro. Tell us.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I think that the threat of COVID-19 scared the entire country.
Yeah.
I think that a lot of people reacted differently, but I think that having the first case here in San Pedro definitely scared a lot of people here on the island. It transitioned from being a international threat for us as a family to being a very real threat to our well-being. And even going to the store, going to to different places to visit friends and family became a very outlandish thought, and we transitioned from seeing this pandemic from outside perspective to being right on the front lines. I think that here in San Pedro we went on lockdown first, and definitely a lot of businesses and families were very affected by the fear of going outside, and people who were in contact with the person, the first case. It was definitely a scary thought, but I think that San Pedro on a whole handled it very well. Communities and the community came together. We tried to house people, clothe people, feed people, and we tried to make it as comfortable and as try to bring back some sense of normality to it all.
Yeah. So, that had to be such a unique experience. So you went from seeing the hustle and bustle in San Pedro in part of the peak of the season to just nothing. What was that like? It's like an assault on your senses, isn't it?
Definitely, yes. I think it hit extremely close to home. Our family, we have a restaurant, and we were actually doing. I mean, a lot of restaurants in San Pedro were doing fantastic. They were doing really well, and for this to happen, we've never had a point in time where cash flow, tourism just ceased. I mean, when a hurricane came, it only affected us for a short amount of time, and the threat went away. But we've never had a point in time where, on a national scale, we shut down. So I think that definitely was an extremely daunting situation for everyone to be in.
Yeah.
Wow.
All right. And Armando, tell us about your experience.
Hi, morning everyone. So with me, I was oblivious to what was happening. I didn't really believe of it, and I thought that it wasn't going to come to Belize. And if it did, I don't think it was going to spread like how it did with the other countries. When it came to the last few days, some of my employees started to get scared. And one of the employees actually had a bit of allergies. And everyone was freaking out because I think by that time they already confirmed the first case in San Pedro. And everybody was just freaking out, like, it's time for us to shut down. I'm like, no, he just has allergies. But the way COVID-19 has affected us after the shutdown is just crazy because it was so busy before, and when they called the shutdown, everything just went quiet, basically.
Because you have your own business.
Yes, that's correct.
So you've seen the direct economic impact.
Yes, I have.
Yeah.
So, but
I think that's a really interesting perspective, and I'd like your friends to weigh in. So Armando, because you are an entrepreneur, you felt it directly. Joshua, you said something so critical that your family has a restaurant, and I'm sure individually each one of you have parents in your household. Money is an issue for everyone. It's either a loss of job or less income, or the fear of losing more income or your job. How do you guys feel, especially as students, where you know that you're not necessarily contributing and you're seeing all of this financial strain around you? What is it like for you? Armando, you can start.
Well, with me, I have bills to pay, and I started to worry about it pretty quickly, but then I got notified by banks that they won't be charging interest on credit cards until later on. My loan the payment had been stopped, so that made me stop worry a bit. Thereafter, I start doing online advertising mainly, and doing online purchases, because we do digital purchases as well. So that way I start to push more digital rather than physical products that we offer.
Okay. So definitely, and what I'm hearing from everybody is that as much as we had this pandemic, which of course it's definitely not gone as yet, there isn't a vaccine or whatever for COVID-19, but everybody learned something from it. We're hearing that, a second wave is not an if but a when. Are we prepared for it mentally? How do you feel about that? Armando.
Okay. I thought it was someone else. But the way I guess I am prepared mainly because I've not really missed the outside world. I've always been inside, and majority of our business is online. So
Yeah.
the only time I actually miss outside is when we have to take packages out to Tropic Gear or BPMS. Actually, do really miss Tropic having a lot of different flights as well. They only work on Wednesdays and Friday, I believe now. So
Yeah.
I guess I am actually prepared for it now.
Yeah.
It hasn't affected me much now.
And the rest of you, if I could get a response to my previous question, looking at witnessing the financial strain and the impact on the economy, what's that been like for you? I mean, Tajani, Tajir, you're a business student. Joshua, you are in the heart of our tourism center. And even in Cayo, that they relied a lot on tourism as well. So you see people, friends, family members, just suddenly not having an income, and you're thinking, this is the world I need to go into within the next year or two. What's it like for you?
I think it definitely affected people differently. I think different families and different dynamics had been affected very differently. I myself, I was employed while going to school, so I paid my tuition, and my parents were also entrepreneurs. So the weight of it all definitely was overwhelming. I was extremely grateful to have not lost my job in this whole pandemic, but I know a lot of people, especially students who also go to school and work. I definitely think that a lot of them are struggling as well with not being able to bring in an income after most of their money went to tuition, and now not being able to support their family in any way, or to have any income to bring into the family dynamic.
Yeah.
Wow. And Tijari?
Well, for me personally, I was a full-time student at SJC, so I did not have like a full-time job. I would do a side hustle of nails, and that's a real close contact kind of job, so that had to be stopped. So I had to put a pause on that, and like the little cash I would get from that, I'm not getting any at all now. So it's a little hindrance, but maybe it's for the best practice.
I hear you.
And how about you, Amy?
For me, it was my dad not being able to work and my mom also not being able to work.
Wow.
So that's a bit stressful, being here and then not, I'm in the house and we all eat and we're staying here and I can't contribute. So I was a bit stressed about that. But also when my sister was in San Ignacio, she was telling me that it is so empty, and San Ignacio being a tourist attraction also, we've never seen it so empty before. And even that time that I went, no one at all was there. We had locals, like maybe one or two people walking around, but it was so empty. And even Benke, that it's so quiet, it's even quieter. There's no one on the street. Even going to the store, you would probably see some cars passing by, but now you don't see any of that. So that change a bit was like, wow, this is actually affecting us.
Yeah.
I know.
So what's it been like since we have now been able to go over a month without any new cases? What's your mind frame like today?
I would say for me, it's like I try to stay positive, and I know, like how you said, it's not when the second strain is gonna happen. It's not if it's gonna happen. It's when it's gonna happen.
Yeah.
And so for me, I'm keeping positive, and I say when we do have it, I hope it's not really bad like other countries. I hope that we don't have any fatalities. I hope that people are even more prepared and people know how to deal with it, and we keep that social distancing. Because I see that has helped us a lot. I think keeping our distance and, staying safe and keeping precautions has actually helped us to have such little cases.
Yeah.
Anyone else want to weigh in on where their mind frame is today?
For me personally, I can't wait for the country to open up, like not internationally borders, but for instance, local interaction within the community.
Yeah.
You know, so the economy can get a little more stable. You know.
Yeah. Okay. So you guys miss like nightlife? Because I know if there's anybody who'd be out late at night, it would be you guys. You're not missing your nightlife? Oh, it's because the parents are watching, isn't it?
No. I think that I think that it definitely disrupted everybody's daily routines,
Yeah.
their habits, their interests, their hobbies, and I think that on the wide spectrum of how people are affected. Myself, I haven't been affected where nightlife has been a huge part of my life, but definitely simple things like going to church, just visiting friends, visiting family. I think that those things are at first were disrupted, and those were really those things really affected us. But I think that right now, the pending second wave, I think that everybody transition from having a threat to, oh man, the disease is gonna affect me, to being, okay, what can I do to benefit the country and not become a part of the problem, but rather the solution. I think that everybody is doing their part, and I think everybody is ready to contribute to society.
Okay.
That's an interesting perspective, you know, going from feeling a bit helpless to kind of knowing what we need to do to protect ourselves and to protect the wider community from the spread of the virus. I do appreciate that insight. You know, there's been some really funny memes that have gone around, and I think that one of them has to do with the role reversal that took place in the pandemic. Usually your parents are the ones who tell you don't go out and stay home. And now it's the younger people telling the parents, don't go out, stay home, wear your masks. Did you guys have that experience? Did you find that maybe you took it a bit more seriously than some of the other people in your family?
I think after 2 months, I think everybody's a bit sick of being home. But I think definitely, I think at first the parents were a lot more concerned with having their students, having their children at home and protecting them and just trying to keep them safe. But I think after we learned a bit more about this virus and how lethal it was to people who were vulnerable to being affected, I think that students kind of, the younger generation kind of took up the plate and started to put their feet down and say, like, you know, you're the ones that are vulnerable to this, not me. So I think you should practice sanitation and practice wearing your masks. So
You guys are putting yourself in a position to lead in the coming future, which is right around the corner. Let's face that fact. As young people, do you think that when it comes to our authorities, that they're making the right decisions? If there is anything you would change, what would it be and why? So do you think that they're making some very good decisions for us, and what would you change and why? Anyone else? We'll start with you, Joshua.
I think so far our government has made a tremendous effort in order to contain this pandemic, and I think that so far the result has been a good outcome of this. I think that the SI have been doing fantastic work, and I think implementing the curfew was needed. I think that the 2 months of quarantine were definitely needed, and the result of that is we're like going for over a month of no cases. So I think that definitely I'm satisfied, and I'm actually glad that our government is doing such a great job in handling this pandemic. Of course, we could go into the details of what things we can implement or what we would change, but I think overall, Belize in itself and as a country, we've come together and actually helped in containing this pandemic.
Anyone else?
I just want to jump in real quick and say I'm so proud of Belize because we're one of the 12 countries that can say we're COVID free. So of course, we can always do better, but I am just so grateful to be living in one of these countries where we can say that. So I just want to look at the positive side and feel blessed for it.
Yeah, definitely.
And when you look at one of the issues and that was really our focus for today, is kind of to get a mental health update. What I like and what I hear very clearly from you guys is just how easy it is for you to articulate, whether it was frustration or anxiety or just kind of acknowledging that there's an emotional toll that takes place in addition to everything else. And I'm sure that you all know that that's kind of unique to your generation because you just grew up in a time where the acknowledgement of our mental health is a lot different. When you think of some of the stories that you hear and people not being able to, whether it is seek help or kind of just talk to a friend and say, my anxiety is really, really bad right now, having these types of conversations. What do you think in looking at other people who are struggling in feeling in a better headspace? Let me ask Amy, because Amy talked about her anxiety.
Okay, so for me, what helped me, like I said before, gardening and starting to work out. I told my sister about 2 days ago, she's like, she's so stressed. And I told her, stretch while you stress. And so we started laughing about that. But it's true, meditation, it has been known that meditation helps you. And so like how Tajari said, she picked up a new hobby.
Yeah.
But for young people, what I would say is just take care of yourself and be kind to yourself. And, if what you came out of this lockdown with was watching everything on Netflix, then that is fine. I'm not saying because I worked out, you all should work out. Mm-hmm. And I would also say to stay off of social media or be less on social media because we see a lot of these celebrities that we look up to doing all these new things and like do this, and then we start stressing because we're like, why can't I be like them? Just try to stay happy, stay healthy mentally and physically, and make sure you get up in the morning and have a nice breakfast, and then just try to stay mentally okay. We don't have to come out of here with a new talent. We don't have to come out of here knowing French. Right. As long as we come out of here and we're happy, that is fine.
Well, Amy,
I love that.
That's very inspirational. And I just want to throw this out to you, and I know it's a happy thought. You're into gardening. Well, you remind me of me. So you're into gardening. Which one of your plants do you cherish the most, or how do you feel seeing new shoots? And I'm saying this so we can rub off on Marlene, right? How do you feel about new shoots?
Okay, so my mom started buying a lot of succulents because she loves succulents. Yeah. So we have those. We're taking care of those, and now she wants to grow roses. She loves roses, and we have one rose tree. Yeah. So she started buying other little roses and planting them around. And usually she takes care of it most of the time. But then when she goes out to take care of her mom or to go out with my aunt, she's like, you have to water it and you have to take care of it and make it, groom it and make sure it's well. Yeah. So that's what I'd say.
Yeah.
Lovely, man.
Now, what you said about kind of just being gentle to yourself, I think is a really important message. Definitely. If it's Netflix that made you survive, great. If it's cooking that made you survive, great. If it's reading, if it's gardening, whatever it takes to keep yourself mentally healthy. Mm-hmm. Let me ask, how have you been able to balance schoolwork and also just the uncertain times? Because it's kind of hard when your routine changes. to get your mindset right.
Yeah.
Was it difficult to kind of manage school when all of this was happening all around you?
It was a bit difficult at first because when the lockdown first started, especially my mom, it was like I wasn't going to school anymore, so I had more free time to do stuff around the house.
Yeah.
And I had to tell her, okay, just give me a break to do my schoolwork, then I could help you.
Yeah.
But now that we're done with school, like we actually got our report cards yesterday, so now that we're done with school, it's much easier for me. I could help around the house. I do things much freely, but before it was kind of stressful.
So before mom thought it was holiday and you could do more chores.
Yes.
Ah.
She was like, you do all of this since you're not going to school anymore.
Yeah.
Tough.
And for the rest of you, how'd you manage school when everything was kind of so uncertain?
Trijari, let's go with Trijari.
School was a bit difficult with the transitioning from in-class to online because every student has a different learning method. I'm a more sit in class, listen to the lecturer and take in what they're saying. I'm not an online person. Like I need to hear what the lecturer is saying and take my notes.
Yeah.
So it was a bit difficult, and I'm a person, if I'm not getting it, I will shut it out. So in the beginning, I was shutting out school. I didn't log into no class. I was leaving it there.
God.
And then afterwards, I was like, I want to get a good report card, so I need to start focusing. So it's a mind game that you need to know what you want and go for it.
Excellent.
I love your honesty.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Honesty. Joshua.
I think that personally, I really enjoyed going to school. I think I enjoyed seeing my teachers, seeing my friends, interacting with people. I agree with Trijari. That's how most people learn, when they're involved, when they're hands-on. I think that transitioning so rapidly to online school has definitely affected a lot of people differently. But on a more personal note, I think it definitely trained me to be more disciplined and to pick up good habits of balancing work, school, and being at home with my family. So I think that being at school benefited you as long as you had good habits and good practices and had a very strong drive to do it. But I think that a lot of people who aren't used to being online, like myself, I think that we had to break bad habits and to develop better ones. And I think that overall, everybody, as far as I'm concerned, everybody that were taking classes online, they enjoyed it for the first couple of weeks, but now they're kind of tired of it. They miss their friends. They miss seeing someone in person. But I think that overall, everybody's kind of playing their part in bettering Belize and bettering themselves. And I think that they did a great job in doing online classes.
So let me ask, how did the report cards look this semester with online classes? Was it, I won't ask specific grades, but I'll say, was it an improvement? Was it the same, or did it clearly show that it was an adjustment? Look at these smiles.
Personally, it was the best semester I've ever had.
Okay.
I think definitely our teachers were fantastic. They were lenient. They were always ready to answer, always there to help. So I think that our teachers did a phenomenal job in helping our students and helping everyone feel like it's not 100% up to them, that they still have that support with them. So it was fantastic to see our teachers actually stepping up and doing such a phenomenal job.
Great.
All right, Trijari?
Tricky question. All I would say is that at home, you have the internet resources right at your hand for any convenient moment. So yes, it was the best semester of my entire semester.
We hear you.
All right. Google was right there as the student companion, right?
Yes, best friend.
All right.
All right, guys. Well, we really wanted to take the opportunity to just check in with some of our young people and see how you're doing and what you're thinking of. As we prepare for what is going to be your first summer in a pandemic, What are your thoughts moving forward? Do you plan, or are you just waiting for more allowances for movements to hang out with your friends again?
I think I completely agree with Amy, with Armando, and with Tajari when they mentioned the 2 months now in this quarantine. I think that Amy mentioned this. You could, in the past 2 months, you could have had 2 months wasted or 2 months invested.
Yeah.
And I think that for the most part, everyone is looking to the summer as, maybe and hopefully being more free, and people could go back to some form of normality. But I think everyone is looking forward and seeing that light at the end of the tunnel. But I think in today and in the everyday, I think that we were supposed to use this time to invest and to pick up that book you were putting off for so long, and to sign up for that course you're hesitant of joining. I think that these 2 months definitely helped a lot of us self-reflect and to pick up new habits and to break bad ones.
Yeah.
All
right. Guys, it was an excellent time chit-chatting with you. And we wish you guys all the very best, all right?
Thank you so much for having us.
All right.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for coordinating, Ida. We do appreciate it, and keep up the great work at
Thank you.
the DYS.
And to you guys, thank you for allowing our young people to kind of voice out their opinions and talk about their mental health. At DYS, please visit us on Facebook. We have a lot of things to help you with your mental health too.
Nice. All right.
Have a great morning.
And from keeping the mind healthy to keeping the body healthy, we're going to be talking about virtual physical education. That's coming up after the break. Stay tuned.
Welcome back to Open Your Eyes. Overcast skies here in the city. The wind is blowing like crazy.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, we are about to venture off now into our final topic for the morning. This is actually a good one here. Check this out. Virtual PE. Virtual PE and basketball curriculum. We've got Belize's very own Roscoe Rees. He's a physical education teacher and he's a coach as well. Roscoe, good morning, my buddy.
Yes, good morning, Marlene. Good morning, John. Good morning, Belize. It's raining outside, so we're going to have to move.
Oh, it started?
It started.
Yeah, it started. It's raining hard out here, so we're going to have to move in.
Oh, man.
The minute we go inside, the minute we go live, that's when the rain comes. All right, but you know what? That's going to be the perfect fix because some of the kids might not be able to go outside and they'll actually have to do some indoor activities. Roscoe, if you can still hear us?
Yes, I'm just
okay,
trying to...
great.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, while you readjust, we can just chat. So here's the thing. The kids, they're not getting as much physical activity as they normally would at school. They have recess time where they run around, lunch break, afternoon, after school, and now all of them are just inside for the majority of the day. What's your recommendation to parents to kind of make sure they're getting out some of that energy?
Well, if you don't have a trainer or somebody who, sorry, hold on. You got to move inside.
Yeah, that's fine.
That's okay, buddy.
You keep on talking to us while you readjust. This is the new live TV.
Yeah, it is. And it's definitely a perfect time to see what you could do inside.
Yeah.
So basically what you have to do is you got to be able to maximize your space.
Mm-hmm.
So if you don't have a yard, you got to find somewhere that you could play or just a nice area that you could work.
Mm-hmm.
What I find myself doing with my students is I use YouTube links.
Okay.
Okay.
There's so many YouTube links that you could use for physical education that give the students or the children actual visual of seeing someone doing an exercise, and then they just have to mirror it.
Yeah.
I find using cartoon videos with little characters doing physical exercise usually works as well because a lot of the smaller children, they like cartoon characters. So just for them to see a little character doing exercises and music playing in the background, it's kind of fun for them. And it gives them an opportunity to work out. It gives them an opportunity to exercise.
Yeah.
So you're still doing PE lessons online?
Yes, our school has pretty much transferred our whole school curriculum to an online-based learning. So we shut down school pretty much around March the 16th. I think it was like almost 2 weeks before the COVID-19 pandemic started to really affect us. And we had transferred our whole school to online schooling. It was a very what do you call it, like a cram, like we crammed through it. It was very fast paced. We had to get all the students' email addresses and link them to the Google online class. And it was a challenge at first, you know. Some classes, I have infant one students, and you know, how do you expect an infant one student to log on to the computer and be so tech savvy? So, you know, a lot of help has to come from the parent or the tutor, and you know, we just do the best job that we can with providing our students with online learning just to keep them occupied and busy in this time.
Yeah, you know, especially dealing with students. I love PE. PE was one of my favorite subjects in school. Reason being is because I was able to be physical, and you know, you like having your teacher there. What was that transition like for your students, and what are your students saying? Do they like it this way? Do they prefer it another way? What are they saying?
I think in the beginning it was something new for them, so a lot of them were excited.
Yeah.
But I think after a month, a lot of them are ready to get back to the classroom. A lot of them miss their friends.
Yeah.
They miss that social interaction. But for the most part, it's been fun for them too. I get a lot of positive feedback from parents. You know, for most of my classes, everybody has a different schedule, so it's not like we're all able to log on at the same time. Some students do their work on their own pace, or when they have time, they have access to more than one device. So there are a lot of challenges that come with the online learning, but for the most part, they were very, very open to it. They're having fun. I'm trying to find ways to keep them active and just to keep them having fun. So I guess it's been a plus, you know.
Mm-hmm. You know, one of the big things with PE was competition between this half of the class and that half of the class. How are you making it competitive for them?
Well, competitive, it really boils down to you. You got to challenge yourself.
Yeah.
You know, unless you have a brother or a sister who's pretty much of your age, then, you know, you could compete against him or her. But if it's just you got to find ways to motivate yourself. And that's one of the most challenging things that I find with young people, is to get them to be motivated to want to work out or to want to exercise. I mean, it's not the funnest thing to do, but at the end of the day, when you feel your body healthy and see your muscles getting stronger, you're running faster, you're jumping higher, then you know that the exercise is working.
And you know, it's so important. We were talking about it during the break. It's so important that the kids get some level of exercise. They have a lot of energy to expend. And, you know, it's hard to do that when you're just sitting around in the house all day. Even though you're going to school, there are little recess breaks where they run around with their friends, or lunch break where they're moving around, and they don't have that as much when they're indoors.
Yes, definitely. Like I said, parents just got to find the time to let the children out, let them outside, let them run around in the yard, let them play. Sometimes it doesn't even really have to be all about a structured physical activity. It could just be free play, just getting outside, burning some energy, riding a bike, playing with your dog, running around the yard, doing some jumping jacks, skipping a rope, swimming in a pool. So there's so many ways to just keep a young child active in this time, rather than just having them locked up inside on a computer or on a tablet. You gotta let them out in the open and let them get some fresh air.
Now, I know you had some drills you wanted to show us today. And some examples.
We were gonna switch the topic to basketball.
To basketball, yeah. And it's still raining.
It's just drizzling slight. We're good. We can come out in the open now.
All right. Because we do know that while you are a physical education teacher, we also get to have most conversations with you about your basketball training programs and the work that you do with the kids. So it's really important that they're able to keep their shape and stay conditioning even during this time. How have you been keeping in touch with your players?
Well, we keep in touch with our players mostly through online platform.
Yeah.
WhatsApp, Facebook, Zoom, Skype. So we try to keep contact with our players. Know a lot of players play basketball, play sports in general.
Yeah.
In this time, they remain.
Are they able to play? Because you can't go to a public court, can you?
No, you can't go to a park. Gyms are closed still. So you got to play in your own space. So if you have a yard that you could play in, if you have access to a basketball rim in your yard, or you could just knock up a bucket on a board, or you can make your own rim if you want to shoot that bad.
Yeah.
Or sometimes imagine that a rim is there. All right, you just got to imagine that a rim is there, and you just shoot the ball up like you're shooting a rim, catch it back in your stance, shoot the ball up, and you're working on your form still. You're getting a repetition.
Okay.
So there are many ways to maximize your time and your space.
Definitely, working on your elbow, how you position yourself. There are so many things you could do without the rim. But then again, Roscoe, we know for a fact that you never stop. You continue to go and you continue to excel on your coaching skills and abilities. What are the new things are there any new things online that you would tell your students to, you know what, you could check this out, you could view these things? And I think these are very important things as well.
And we may have lost
There are many trainers, there are many coaches online that have access to drills and programs, and you just gotta search it out, and you just got to find it. For me, right now, I'm just trying to develop more knowledge as a coach through coaching education, and I linked up with an organization called Gannon Baker Basketball. Gannon Baker is my mentor. I discovered him a couple of years online. He's one of the best basketball trainers in the world, and I've been in his mentorship program for over a year, and I got offered to take their basketball curriculum. So I recently finished a full basketball curriculum from basic all the way up to advanced, and now I'm currently working on my professional coaching license. Wow. So,
nice.
Yeah.
So you've been maximizing your time too.
Yes. That's the only way to get better in life. You got to maximize your time and make use of it. So what I did during this downtime, because my school closed and that was my physical job to go to school every day, we had to work from home a lot. We're still working from home. A lot of schools are closed. The government schools, they have these packages that they offer for the students, but I don't know if anybody's really behind them supervising them to do work. For us, my boys got to log on to their Google Class every day, and they get work. They're still in the school curriculum. Yeah, we're still in school right now, so school has not stopped for them.
Yeah.
They don't finish school until about mid-June for the high school, and then the elementary school goes probably up until the last week in June.
Yeah.
So I maximized my time by doing this online basketball curriculum, and it was very, very challenging. I completed, I would say, like 2 months of work in like maybe 7 days.
So Roscoe, tell me something. What's your? I know every summer you work with the children to be able to play basketball. We don't know what the regulations will be in a month from now, 2 months from now. Have you kind of been trying to figure out ways that you can still keep the children engaged in basketball, even if you aren't able to get together?
Yes, and the most efficient way right now to keep students or basketball players engaged is through the online medium. So the same way me and you could be having a conversation via Zoom, I could be having a basketball session with my players via Zoom. They have to have access to the internet. They have to have a device, and from there we just go.
Yeah.
So right now, I do couple Zoom classes with some training with some of my players where I physically go to their house. They have a basketball court in their house. We maximize the space and we get our work in.
Yeah. All right. So you have a drill to show us this morning. We're losing. Yeah. We're losing the connection this morning.
Well, it's in the rain's gonna have to kind of ease up off the drill. What I do want to mention is that I have access to a basketball curriculum and I want to offer it to more coaches in Belize.
Yeah.
So if there are any coaches out there, anybody who's working with the primary school team or working with the high school team, access to a basketball curriculum, reach out, contact me on Instagram, contact me on Facebook page, inbox me, 5703. My email address is roscoe.reese@gmail.com. Yeah. And just link up and we could find ways to offer you the basketball curriculum so that you can help better.
And in this day and age, you can be any part of Belize because everything is accessible online.
Curriculum and
yeah.
Yes. Everything's accessible online.
All right. Well, Roscoe, we gotta close it off. We're having a lot of connection problems here, but we did get your final message. You said several things. Keep the kids moving. Find YouTube videos so that they can get some exercise in. And if you don't want to do that, just free play. Give them the chance to run around. Basketball players can still keep in shape by practicing form. And staying, exercising during this time. Yep. And for people who are looking for coaching training, they can reach out to you through Facebook, Instagram, email, and you will help them to get to participate in the coaching training that you have done.
Yes, definitely.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
All right, thank you guys. You guys have a great day. Continue
You
to stay
too,
safe.
Roscoe. Yeah.
All right.
And we'll talk again soon.
Yes.
Oh, definitely. Well, it was an excellent time hanging out with Roscoe. That was actually hanging out with Roscoe as he did some basketball training.
I mean, we've had sun every morning. And the one day we need an outdoor setting, there's rain.
That's the way it is.
What does that teach you? We just always got to be prepared for anything.
All right. Well, it was an excellent day. It was an excellent morning. We know the weather is acting up here in the city, but nonetheless, we've still got some more things to share with you. At this particular time, it is that time of the morning whereby you sit the kids in front of the television. All courtesy J&W Shopping Mart. It's time to have a chit-chat with Dr. Binox. And for today, he'll be teaching the children about weather formations. You might want to know, what are hurricanes? Well, Dr. Binox will be showing you right now.